Hello chicos and chicas, today I'm bringing you an absolute belter. About a week or so ago I came across Grandmaster and former Super Grandmaster David Navara, one of the nicest humans who ever touched a chess piece. And we played two rapid games and I'm going to bring you the first one and I'm going to show you what went down in that super exciting game. So we kicked off with the King's Indian defense, which was a very pleasant change from last time when we played, when David played the London. Mind you, I was really doing well in that game too. And he went for the bayonet attack, which is one of the systems that I like to face the least. And despite how this game turned out, I really need to do a big reflection on my systems that I play against it. So A5 was played, one of the biggest main lines, and the move itself surely cannot be blamed for anything. But after BA, this C5 idea, which I don't really think I can avoid anyway, because even if I play rook A5 after knight D2, I believe that I don't really have a choice but to play the C5 setup. So it makes no real difference whether I play C5 first and then take or not. So we are in this variation, and traditionally I score very poorly in this line. And I don't really enjoy playing against it either. A lot of King's Indian players like this pawn structure when the queen side is very clogged up. But there is a particular strategy and idea here for white that I simply don't know how to handle. And I always get in trouble against this. And what it is exactly is, I'm going to show you in a couple of moves. So A4, knight D7, obviously preparing for the standard F5 break. Knight B5, the rook pulls back to cover the pawn. Now, at this point, by the way, I would like to point out that there is a bit of a discussion here, or debate, whether the knight should go back to E8 or D7. And it's always a tricky decision for me to make, because if I go to E8, which probably is the better one by the way, then sometimes there are ideas where white gets to somehow sack a knight on D6 and pick off the pawn on C5 as well. But that's more typical in the line when the bishop is on A3, ready to do damage on the diagonal. So perhaps knight E8 would have been more to the point, because now my bishop is disconnected from F5, and that may be a problem later on. So I pulled the rook back to A6. My opponent played rook A3, stock standard stuff, exactly as expected. And here I played H6. The reason why I did this is because the immediate F5 I thought could well be met by knight G5. Now, as it turns out, this is not the end of the world because of knight F6, and the knight can't jump into E6 because E4 hangs, and if they take on F5 first, then according to the engine, I'm kind of okay. But I really don't like the look of this position too much either, to be honest with you, after something like bishop D3 with a firm control of the E4 square. Not a fan. Not a fan. So I wanted to eliminate this. I played H6. And this is where the game took a very interesting turn that allowed me to get into a position that I wanted to, and one that I don't think that any King's Indian player should be allowed to get from white's perspective. So believe it or not, your engine would tell you that here white is already up, excuse me, about 1.5. And that says a lot about this setup, right? And the reason for that is because black's only way to play here is F5. And if white plays here the right move, or moves, there are multiple of them, I should never be able to get F5 in a way that suits black, excuse me. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Bishop D3, F5, takes. This is the idea that I absolutely despise playing against. And the reason for that is the fact that traditionally King's Indian players like to take back with the pawn, retaining the unity of the two pawns in the center, covering every single square and threatening a fork. So there is quite a bit of life in the position. But here comes the cold shower like knight H4, and literally out of nowhere, I actually get ripped apart in the king side. It's crazy. Like, I tried the line with E4, bishop back to B1, and next move is queen H5, rook G3, and out of literal nowhere, we find that all white pieces, barring the B5 knight, which by the way handily ties my rook down to this, are just killing me on the king side. It's crazy. Rook g3, knight e5, and again I can play queen h5 here, maybe rook g3, and it's a complete illusion that I am the attacker here. I'm not. After f4 there is an exchange sack, bishop takes e4, and yeah, not a fun situation to be in. It just looks like all I have is weaknesses everywhere, no real attack. Can't take c4 because of various tactical ideas. I suspect bishop c3 check is going to be the main dirt source, and after knight e5 comes rook e1 with an ultimate bishop back, knight d6, and take on e5. But even if we go back a little bit to the bishop b1 move, here I looked at something else. I don't know, maybe after knight e5 I looked at queen h5. Is that a move here? No, because now I can take c4 and then things are a little bit unclear. But there are certain moves here against which queen h5 is also very powerful. And then comes the final strategic business that also hurts me a lot as black. And that is when white plays the move f4. And that just shuts down the e5 square. And it's very tricky after that to activate these knights at all. Now, if I don't play e4, then they just slide back and do the same thing. Super obnoxious stuff. So for example, knight f6, yeah, bishop c2, or b1, doesn't really make a difference. c2 might be even smarter to keep an eye on this. Right, and again, the rook is going to swing across. If I play f4, the engine just calmly wants to play g3 and pick at the pawn and chip away at those pawns in the center. And again, there will be more white pieces pointing to the king side, crazy as it may sound, with the rook especially joining the party, than black ones. But also good here is queen b1, exerting even more pressure on the light squares and taking control of the e4 square. So overall, huge discomfort here. I don't like this. I don't even know what to do. The engine here finally wants to drop the knight back to f6 to h5 to f4, which is also just like, yeah, catastrophe is written on it. But my opponent played queen c1, which I thought was a sign of hesitation, defended the pawn, and after knight e1, I was so happy to pull the trigger on f5. This is a world of a difference because the knight on h4 is a very potent attacker that keeps an eye on vitally important light squares. Now, it's a mere observer, and if we look at the same lines, I think after knight f5 I'm okay, but even, yeah, actually I would take with knight. I would take with knight, and now the e4 square and the control of that square is far more difficult to obtain for white, especially without playing f3 than it would have been otherwise. So my opponent, he played f3, and that is the move that no human would happily play in this position, because now after f4 we have the dream kid, the king's Indian dream. No queenside play for white, and I have all the time in the world to build up my attack with the knight here, or rook g8, bishop wherever, and g4. And that's exactly what I started doing. And so my very highly esteemed opponent went like, no, we need to shut the king side down, buddy. But now I have the thematic h5 break with a pile up on the h file and access to the h4 square. And at this point I felt like the game was gradually slipping away from the grandmaster, and my feeling was correct. So he played moves that kind of fit the structure, but they are all extremely defensive, and they don't really impact the position in a positive way for white. So for example, here trading on h4 looked necessary, but now instead of a monster knight on h4, I will have a super potent knight on g5. Now, of course, I was super helped, and in this regard, it's very important that we understand, structures, and we have got comparison points, because in order for me to enter this with the confidence I did, I needed to remember a variation in the King's India main line, and now you are going to understand why I was so excited to enter this, which looks like this. Also main line, knight e1, knight d3, not bishop e3, f5, bishop d2, knight f6, f3, f4, g4. And here too, after g5, let's say king g2, h5, h3, knight g6, bishop e1, we have got a variation that roughly looks like... Actually, I mess this up. The bishop should be already on f2. So maybe I'm not going to commit to c5, rook h1, rook h7, bishop f2, check, take, take. Now, the screaming difference between this and the game that I just played is that white is yet to start the queenside push with c5, and they actually cannot do c5. So there is an oncoming attack on the queen side, so I'm kind of urged to accomplish something on the king side, right? Whereas here, per game, white has nothing. So I'm not urged at all. I have all the time in the world to rearrange my army in order to somehow break through. And I do think that I played this phase of the game actually consistently well. So I'm going to offer reasonably limited amount of commentary because I think that the moves kind of speak for themselves. So I wanted to plant the knight on g5. I mentioned it to you. Obviously, queen h4 loses to hg, attacking the queen. So that was the fattest spoiler I've ever done in my life. Nice work, buddy. Yeah, so went in, traded on g4, only way to make progress. So again, I don't feel the need to explain. And now fg is not possible on account of the pawn hanging. And so I expected hg, played, and now we managed to break through, right? So now black has a passed pawn and a way to kind of seep into the white's position if white is not careful enough. The a5 pawn needs constant babysitting. This was the first point in the game when I felt that it's my game to botch. And if everything goes well, I should win this. And of course, that did put a bit of pressure on me in terms of, you know, emotionally and on the clock too, by the way, because I've never beaten Navara before, and I felt that that time was coming close. So here I decided that my best course of action was to drag all the attention onto the a5 pawn, forcing the queen to defend it, forcing the rook to come across, and then potentially swing back to the king side and maybe penetrate here or sack on a5 and run the pawn. So let's see how I accomplish this. I went queen d7. This is to allow the rook to swing across and the bishop to be pulled back. Know that the knight is extremely obnoxious because it covers the pawn and hits f3. So now I'm doing the pile up, pile up, pile up. This was annoying. I didn't like it and it took me a while to figure out how to respond. I just need to simply come around here. And now with the knight being protected, I am threatening to take. So my opponent went back. And that was the point when I thought that I managed to completely stretch the defense too thin, because now I'm threatening to get a queen and a5 is also hanging. So he played queen d2. Which kind of stops h2, and here I cashed in on the idea that I was building up for rook a5, and of course the idea was that if rook a5, rook a5, rook a5, bishop a5, queen a5, then h2, and I calculated as far as check and then pulled the knight back to f7, shielding the checks, protecting d6, getting a new queen, game over. So that was my hope, but of course a super GM is a super GM because they put up the stiffest resistance possible. And so he sacked on d6. I took it. And so now we are in this endgame where I immediately force the queen all the way back home and then beneath the pawn. Now this was the second part in the game where I went like, if I don't win this, I'm gonna so hate myself. Right? And now again, pressure is on, even less time I had. And so I went in for the kill with queen h3, which of course threatens this. Right, d6, their only chance. Let's the chase shall begin. So I played king f6 so that I can meet d7 with bishop king e7. And it was bishop e2 where I dropped my guard. And I didn't realize here that my opponent had one last trick to play for. Granted, I had little time, but not little enough to not to spot what was cooking here. So I played queen g3, which is definitely the best move. It threatens queen g1. d7 played, king e7, and queen b1. And here, I regret to inform you, although you already guys figured out, that I managed to botch a minus 7.6 against the Super GM. I don't know what I was thinking. I just can't possibly explain why I did not play queen g1 and I played knight f3. To be honest with you, the explanation is not that obvious. And I didn't see the difference between the two moves. I thought either or. But it's not the case. Knight f3 botches immediately the game. And Grandmaster Navara immediately jumped on my mistake by promoting to queen takes and queen b6 check. And it was this point when I realized that I needed my knight on g5 to successfully walk out of the checks, which I cannot do anymore. So the idea is that if I start running toward the king side, then I get checked. I go here, and this is the point where my knight would come very handy. On g5, for example, after check, knight e6, and there would be no more queen checks. And if I go here, they just go check. And if I take, check. And it is one of the most tragic outcomes I've ever had in a game. And I just can't dodge the checks. The reason for that is because after king h4, I'm not going to give check here, but here. Back, here. Back, and the checks go on forever. So I couldn't do this, which was an insta heartbreak. And so I was trying to sneak out in a different way, but now queen e6 check. Seal the deal. To be fair though, every single queen check available draws. And yeah, ouch, even wrong button here. The heartbreak is real. I thought that here I wanted to sell some king c5, queen c5, but even there I can't escape the check. So from here on out, it's just a disillusioned YouTuber against a top GM, and now we understand why top GMs, because it's so ridiculous to put them away even at the last moment. So let's see what I messed up here. So if instead of knight f3 I had played queen here, all right, then the same story goes like this. Promote to queen check, takes, check, king e8. That's quite annoying, by the way, because, and that's the other one, I forgot to tell you this, that after king e8 there is no queen e6 check. And that's all she wrote. Check, king here, check. And there is multiple ways really that I can run for the heels, but queen c5, so forget about that. And that was the final component that I forgot. That when I play queen g1, I defend the pawn. So after king f8, there is no more checks. In a way, I guess king c8 is even better, because that immediately cuts out all checks, and I'm golden. Now here, white still has a chance, I think, to get cocky. I think if I queen here, yeah, this still botches the game, because now check here, here, and it is perpetual. But what I do have here is queen e3 check. And then I get to pick off the bishop with check. And then I get to pick off everything with checks, and then there is definitely no chance of perpetual check. For example, check here, and there is a absolutely marvelous idea here that would have definitely shut down business, and that looks like this, check. And after king takes, we have got a beautiful fork. And otherwise, I can promote with check. All right. That is beautiful. But also note, like in practical terms, even if I didn't have that check, I would be able to defend the c5 pawn with a check irrespective of where the king goes. and then I'm free to do whatever, because then I can just tuck my king away here. So that was, ladies and gentlemen, my glorious play and then glorious fail against Grandmaster David Navara. Yeah, this still stings a bit because it would have been an epic victory, but overall it was an exciting game, and I felt like certain parts I played really well, and it's a great pity that we didn't manage to put it away, but hey, there is always a next time. Please don't forget, guys, to smack the like button, sub if you haven't done so yet. You can super thank me as well. There is an option for that as well, and yeah, I will be back with the next soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.